really what we've got up here is basically what you guys can expect for your free response section of the quiz for this unit. And I'm already, you're pretty much at the spot just by watching that video where you should be able to answer some of these basic questions. So what we have here, is this going to be an observational study or an experiment? Observational study? Mm-hmm.
I said experiment because there's a control group of people that didn't take the prep course, and so it seems like it was manipulated.
Yes. I can understand the argument for an observational study, but the big thing with experiments have things called treatments. What would you say the treatment was in this case? One more time? Taking the prep course. Although you can make the argument for an observational study because were the treatments assigned? Okay, so we have this little kind of conundrum going on. We have something that we could call a treatment, this prep course, but those treatments were not assigned. So when a participant chooses what they're going to do, what is that? That's an observational study. Okay, so that's an observational study because, and here's the big issue, there's more that goes into your SAT score. It's not just about did you take a prep class or not. There's going to be a difference between students who take prep classes and students who don't. Students who take prep classes maybe are working that much harder and care that much more, or maybe their score is just that low and they're trying to do better. So, do I not have the answers up here? Nope, I do not have the answers up here. Okay, so it is going to be an observational study because the treatments were not assigned. Okay? I can understand the idea of a control group, and we kind of have that, but the whole thing for observational study is you do not assign treatments. Okay? What would be the explanatory variable? What do I think explains something? Avni? Taking the prep class. And what do I think taking the prep class explains? The rise in SAT scores. So if you want to think about it, a variable is something that changes. So I have two things that are going to change here. Either yes or no, you took the prep class, and then what actually happened to your SAT score in the end. So the explanatory variable, the thing that I think explains the change in SAT scores, is the taking of the prep class. So can we conclude that taking the prep course will cause students' SAT scores to increase? No, why not? She's like, don't put me on the spot. Put you on the spot automatically. It's hard. Cameron, I'll let you go. Ding, ding, ding. Give the boy a cookie. I don't have cookies. Otherwise I would. I know. I'm so sorry. False advertisement. Fake news. Okay. You cannot say cause and effect because it is an observational study. And again, it goes back to that idea of why did that person's score increase? Did it increase because of the SAT prep course? Or does it increase because they're willing to put the work through? I have seen a lot of kids not take a prep course, but actually work and do kick butt stuff because that was their choice. I have taught an SAT prep course. I taught it for several years and saw no change because the only reason the kids were there, mom and dad made them come. And mom and dad aren't going to make you learn. You can drag a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can push a kid into a SAT prep class, but you can't make them learn. Okay? So you got to understand there might be going on with that. And that's the big thing about an observational study. Okay? All right, well, I kind of said 4. Did you guys come up with anything else than what I've said that might affect their SAT scores other than the prep class? Cameron, you apparently are you and Avni are the only people in my classroom today. Yes, go for it. Okay? If you have time to take a prep course, you have more free time, therefore you have more time to study outside. Okay, good. There you go. Actual income, because most SAT prep courses are not free. So if you are able to take an SAT prep course, you probably have money to go towards other things, like, I don't know, paying somebody to take your test for you, or paying a athletic department to pretend that you're on the rowing team. Shade. But apparently 2 weeks in jail is good enough for that, whatever. When you've got money, you can do those things. All right. No bitterness there. So it says, design an experiment that would allow us to determine if the SAT prep causes an increase in SAT scores. Be as thorough as possible. And we're going to really focus on this today. So what is an aspect of this experiment that I would need to be able to do it? Randomization. Randomization how? Bingo, bango, bongo. You've got two groups that you have to randomly assign to who takes the SAT or takes the prep course and those who don't. What else do I need? There are 4 aspects for a good experimental design. Control. So what could my control be? Okay, you can look at the students that do not take the SAT class as your control group. There's other forms of control that we can do here. For example, I probably don't think you guys would think about this, but maybe I only take students who fit a certain grade level and whose original scores were in a certain range. So I'm controlling a certain level to get a baseline. I'm trying to reduce the things that I think might cause change. What else do I need? You're going to try to control things that are going to be influencing factors, maybe the amount of time they spend outside class. You're not allowed to study any more than what you do in this class. Okay, so that's very important. Anything else? What are the 4 principles for an experimental design? Control, randomize, we've got those. Replicate. Replicate means don't just have one person do it. Try to get as many people as possible. It's that whole idea that as a sample size increases, your sample is going to have less and less chance of being kind of really wonky. Okay? So we have control, randomize, replicate, and block. So blocking can be along those lines of what I talked about, where you identify certain groups. You talk about the students that had SAT scores for the first time around that are what you would consider really, really low. And you consider medium, and then you consider a high group, because how you are to start off with might affect how much change that you can have. Somebody whose SAT score is already at a 1300 doesn't have as much room to improve as someone whose SAT score is at an 800. Is that even possible? What's the lowest SAT score you can get? Is it 800? Okay, that's if you spell your name right? You get an 800 automatically. It's true, you get points for spelling your name right. You start up there. So things to kind of All right, so this chapter is about experiments and observational studies. So what we did first, chapter 10 was all about randomization, because that is a huge central portion to everything that we do in this class. Then we talked about surveys. Surveys are great, but because there's so much that can go into them, like bias or how your sample was done, that can skew your results, surveys are kind of the least effective method of gathering data. Okay? But even with surveys, we have randomness. Now we're talking experiments and observational studies. These are a step up. So you kind of think about the effectiveness level. You've got surveys. People can lie real easily. You've got observational studies. There are a lot of what we call lurking variables, things that might affect the outcome that we're not aware of or that we're not measuring. And then you have experiments, which when done well, you can actually determine cause and effect from. Okay? But all of those also have randomization involved in it. So, just a quick overview of what you would have seen in the video, or let's be honest, what you did see in the video, because you're awesome, right? Yeah. She said that so perfectly. Yeah, right. Okay. An observational study, the big thing here is about the treatments themselves. You do not assign these treatments. We are merely observing them. Okay. One of the big things that they used to do is put a whole bunch of kids in a room and watch what toys they played with. And then marketing would go out and try to say, okay, we're not going to make those toys because nobody played with it, or, ooh, those are good, or, so on and so forth like that. So those are valuable. They're not like a total waste of time. It's just not the best thing, because we can just discover trends, possible relationships. I think this type of a person is going to be drawn to this type of a product. But we cannot do cause and effect. I cannot say, because you took my SAT prep course, your scores went up by a minimum of 50 points. Yes. Yes, and that is, so she's talking about the fact that College Board does make that claim. College Board has a ton of data, and they have done controlled studies and experiments where they say, okay, if you use our services, what is going to happen? There's also something when you're looking at two quantitative variables like that, like time spent study and scores, there's something called a correlation coefficient that says, you know what? There seems to be a relationship, but it actually quantifies the percent of that relationship that you can attribute to what you're studying. So it's like, it's not the best claim in the world, but they can make that claim simply because they're not including that little correlation coefficient that might say, okay, so let's say 50% of your change in score is going to be due to how much studying you've done. Okay? So an experiment is specifically done to allow for cause and effect. That's what we want. We want to be able to say, hey, if you have a Takata airbag, you are at a higher risk for airbag explosion in an accident. They have done experiments that have shown that. If you use the weed killer Roundup, your chance for developing, is it non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? Is that what it was? I don't know. Increases. If you are vaping, you risk the chance of, that's actually more of an observational study, because they still haven't quite figured it out yet, but dying. I mean, that's what it's there for. So they have, and the reason, one of the big arguments that the vaping companies are saying is, you haven't done an experiment, you cannot claim cause and effect. You cannot say, my vaping products killed these people. It's kind of like, all right. When you boil water, it gets hot, though. When people smoke this stuff, they have problems. In order to be an experiment, you have to be able to manipulate treatments. Sometimes we call those levels. Like, let's say, if I'm doing an experiment on vaping, my levels might be talking about just a flavored vaping product, no THC, no nicotine. Maybe it's a vaping product with THC. Maybe it's a vaping product with nicotine. Maybe it's a vaping product with all of those. Those are my different levels. Those are the things that I'm investigating. Maybe it's simply how much fertilizer are you giving to your tomato plants. Okay, those are your different levels. Randomly assigning those, the randomization here, it says, okay, the reason why this person did better on their SAT prep or on their SAT retake is because you picked kids that you knew would do better the second time around. Randomization takes our hand out of it. Kind of eliminate some of those problems. Then you've got to compare, because you can't just say, hey, I'm only looking at the people that took the SAT prep course. And for those guys, the average increase in score was 30 points. That's nice. Compared to what? I need to know these things. So some of our vocabulary here, this was very good in the video. So we have a factor, we have response variables. I like to think about it like this. A response variable, that's the thing you're going to be measuring. It can be a feeling. It can be something you can actually take a physical measurement of. Usually it is. But the factor, what I think about those, I like to think in Excel spreadsheet terms. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go across the line here. Subject A. Subject A is getting, okay, so what kind of treatment is it getting? They are getting the SAT prep course. So I use my drag down menu. I choose that. So for their after school studying or outside class studying, they are doing 2 hours a week. So I'm going to select that from my drop down menu. Each of those separate choices, those are my factors. What happens within those drop down menus, those are my levels. Okay? Now, human beings have feelings, so we typically don't call them units. Experimental units. You're such a unit. My gosh. Really, that's about it. That's the justification behind this. People have feelings. We don't want to be numbers. Call me by my name. I'm Princess Sparkle Pants. That was random. Just a little bit. So when we're talking about humans, we usually call them subjects or participants. And basically, if it's a matter of volunteering, we call them participants. If no matter what, you're going to be participating in this, you might know it or not, we usually call you subjects. Sometimes we call them all subjects. Okay? And again, you've got your factors. How much you get in each is called your level. So maybe one of my factors is the SAT prep. The levels are yes or no. If I'm talking about outside of school studying, maybe the levels are 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, or none. You got to be kidding me. Okay? Those are your different levels. The treatment is your combination of everything. Did you take the SAT prep course? Did you study outside of class? Do you have any natural God-given abilities? That might affect your results. And then this is the big thing. This is what we're going to be focusing on today, and that is the 4 principles of experimental design. Most of these are necessary. Some of these are bonuses. You absolutely, in order to consider something to be an experiment, must have some control over the experiment. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a control group. That means that you are in there, up to your elbows and stuff, manipulating things. It's not just happening naturally. You are controlling sources of variation. You are controlling things that you think might affect the outcome. Absolutely required is randomization. My favorite example is from Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy watchers in here? Back from the beginning, I stopped watching when the plane crashed. I was like, I'm done. This is stupid. Stupid. Back in the day, there was, like one of the first couple of seasons, Meredith Grey was taking part in a Alzheimer's study. And the head of the whole unit, his wife was in the study. And Meredith thought it was so important that his wife get any chance that she could. She manipulated the study to make sure the dude's wife was in the treatment group. In doing so, she completely invalidated the entire study. When you take that randomization out of it, in any way, shape, or form, you lose the whole effectiveness of the study. It's no longer can be attributed to, well, you know what? Yes, some people have high memory techniques, some people don't. Well, through randomization, we should see a good breakdown of those into the two groups. But you take randomization out, and your entire experiment goes to the trash. Replication also absolutely necessary. One of my college professors would always say, how many replicates? And all my college professors were from foreign countries, so that I can't even do the accent, but it was always funny to hear them say replicates. Replicate. There are, I can't even do it. There are 140 replicates. A lot of times we will just say there were 140 subjects, but we're not just doing it one time. We're not doing it to one person or one thing. We're testing it over and over and over again, because what that's going to say is one thing might be a fluke. You taking an SAT class, increasing your score 200 points, might be just a massive fluke. You had Ebola the day of the first SAT. She thinks she's dying. She either has Ebola or what was the other thing you said? The plague. Yes. So that could give anybody a bad test day. So there are chances when that occurs. The more we replicate, the more we can attribute a difference to actually what we're controlling rather than just random chance. And block. So what we're going to do here is if we know something might affect the outcome, if I know how much weight you can lose in a program is going to be affected by what your gender is, then I'm going to look at males and females separately. I'm not going to compare. That was weird. I'm going to compare. Is that impale and compare at the same time? I am not going to compare how much weight the women lost to how much weight the men lost. That's just not fair. Right, girls? It's just not fair. Guys cut out soda and all of a sudden they're down 30 pounds. Women don't eat soda. I hope you don't eat soda. That would be an interesting experiment. No soda, no coffee, no sugar, no carbs, no fats. And you're lucky if you didn't gain weight. Being a girl sometimes sucks. So when we know that there are these big sources of variability, we are going to separate. So don't let that affect my comparison. I'm not going to compare the weight loss of a gentleman who started off at 300 pounds. How much weight did he lose? Versus a young lady who starts out at 125 pounds and is just out for those 5 more pounds. I'm not going to compare that weight loss. So we want to block by things that we are aware of. Now, we're not always aware of sources of variation, so sometimes this gets a little bit tricky. But if there is something out there that you think is going to affect the outcome, I know when I'm talking about gas mileage, that whether you're driving a car or a truck plays a huge role in your fuel efficiency. I know that whether you're driving one of the newer cars, even if it's just a sedan, compared to one of those older cars, I know that's going to affect fuel efficiency. God forbid you throw in hybrids or electrical vehicles. Okay? So when you know about things, you block to account for them. So when we do recognize that things are different, if I look at this class and I say, you know what, if I wanted to find the average weight of a student in this class, I think males and females might have a little bit to do with it. Maybe I look at it as certain height ranges. I'm going to separate into those groups. And so those are our blocks. Blocking to us in an experiment is like stratifying in a survey. Yes. Yes. If you block by too many things and each block now only has a very few number of replicates in it, it's like I've blocked by so many different things that each group only has one guy. Basically, it's no longer about how big was your original sample, but how big is your sample within each block. So if you blocked too far and you no longer have like maybe we started out with 300 individuals, but you've blocked so far that now your blocks are down to 3, 4, or 5 people, it's no longer going to be meaningful. So it's basically what you're doing is instead of taking one big experiment, now you have like a whole bunch of tiny, tiny ones. And those tiny ones might not mean as much anymore. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's way too much. You can't do that. You stop when you've identified what you think really are the biggest issues. And if with those biggest issues you still have a reasonable sample size, and we'll talk later about what a sample size should be, that's when you stop. Sometimes you might say there are way too many confounding variables that'll affect what the outcome is, that you actually cannot do an experiment on that. Or there are ways this is kind of an intro to stats level course. If you take a graduate stats level course, there are ways where you can measure all of these different variables all at once. You just don't have the tools to do that yet. So there are ways to kind of account for that. It's like, for example, I did an experiment last year for my grad class. It was so much fun. I hate popcorn, by the way, where I had to pop 24 bags of popcorn. And I had to do that with my big variables that I thought would affect it were brand, was whether or not it had butter added to it, and whether or not I manipulated how the kernels were in the bag before I started. So because of that, if I had just done those, I would have only had 2 elements per block. But because of the way you set it up, you can actually do something like that and get a response from it. It's just a little bit more complicated. Okay, it's a lot more complicated. Okay? So we block because it's a very powerful tool. Yes? No. Yeah, go ahead. Now, once you block, so here's the thing. We block by things we know about. I happen to know whether you are a male or a female. You all right with that? Let's live in a binary world for a second. I can kind of be aware in the beginning whether or not you're male or female. Can I decide, you know what, I want you in the female group? Not just because he's picky. Can I actually change his gender? Not in this binary world. Okay, yes, I know I just opened a huge can of worms. But no, because I put you in a male group does not mean you're male. You are either male or you are female. You don't get to be what I want you to be. I don't decide this. Now, could I decide whether or not you're in my SAT prep course? Yes. So I'm going to block by things that I cannot control, but I know will affect my outcome. Once I've done that, though, I'm going to randomize between my treatments. So maybe I take all of my gentlemen and I go A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, pull from a hat, do whatever, to assign them to the prep class or non-prep class. Okay, so you block by things you control. You randomize things that you can't control. And that's why we call it a randomized block design. We blocked by things we knew. We randomized everything else. So, do I have anybody actually in here this year working at Merrifield? I almost always have had students that work at Merrifield and they're like, oh. Have you ever been to Merrifield before? That mecca of plantiness? You think they're if I wanted to compare Merrifield to Lowe's, just their plants, are they the same? Well, I mean, Merrifield costs 2 or 3 times more. There's a reason for that. You'll have a warranty on plants from Merrifield. They work very hard to make sure that they're top quality and they're fed and they're maintained and yada, yada, yada. Lowe's, hopefully it rains. Maybe they'll feed them occasionally. So there's a difference between what we're looking at. And if I'm going to buy tomatoes from Lowe's, I'm going to buy tomatoes from Merrifield. And I want to know whether or not my question here is, does a fertilizer affect their growth? I am not going to compare tomatoes from Merrifield with a fertilizer to tomatoes from Lowe's with no fertilizer. I'm not going to do that. So what we're going to do is you're going to block by things that you know, and then throughout that, within those blocks, you're going to randomly assign to your different treatments. All right, so when we design an experiment, I love drawing pictures with this because I hate putting that into words. So take a second, just kind of absorb that for a minute. See what you see. Because almost everything in there is absolutely required if you're going to draw. Or you have to physically state it with words, and that just kind of sucks. All right, so let me point some things out. First thing, on this side, you must, on the left or on the top or on the bottom or whatever way you're going, start by identifying your experimental units. Context. Okay, very important. So here, I'm specifically telling you, I've got 12 from store A, 6 from store B. Tomatoes. Those are my who. Who is being studied goes right there. then it says, you know what? That one word right there, block, that is crucial. I am blocking because these characteristics already exist and I know that. And I think it's going to have an issue. So I'm going to block by tomatoes from store A and tomatoes from store B. Are those blocks the same size? No, because I didn't have the same number of plants from both stores. I'm not going to block by gender and then balance out the groups to make sure that there's equal amount of boys as there are girls. And all of a sudden, I'm not going to look at these people because they're not equal. Doesn't matter. You have to state that little word block. If you're writing this out, you would say, using 12 tomatoes from store A and 6 from store B, block by store of origin. Or you could draw a picture. Then you must state. Okay, I'm not kidding here. If you don't say it, it didn't happen. What does this say? Random assignment. You don't want to write it out? Okay. Draw an R and an A. Here on out, every time I see RA, I'm going to believe you mean random assignment. Do not make stuff up. Okay, all of a sudden I'm going to say, I don't even know. My brain is only saying random assignment. If you do not state random assignment, it did not happen. Randomly assign those plants equally among your treatments. Or you can say RA arrows. Here are my treatments. How many treatments are there? Say it again, Eden. 3. Why are there 3? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You do not compare across blocks. Each block has a treatment of the control, half dose, and full dose. 3 treatments. You must always randomly assign to the treatments. You do not need to tell me group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, group 6. You don't need to tell me that. You do need to tell me 4 to treatment 3. 2 to treatment 2. I do need to see how many are going to each of the treatments. And you know what? Again, if I had the number, let's say 14 here, does 14 evenly divide by 3? No. Then you would have 4, 5, and 5. Okay. As equal as they can be, but don't ignore elements because it's not perfect. Now this is the last piece. My response variable here, very technical. Juiciness and tastiness is what I'm measuring. Is everybody awake listening to me? Hugely important. Ready? You cannot compare across blocks. So I have my treatments. I take these arrows from the treatments and I say, compare juiciness and tastiness. If I'm writing this out in paragraph form, I would say, compare juiciness and tastiness within each block. Never across blocks. Once you separate, never go back again. It's like I blocked. There's a line going through here that I can never cross. Everybody okay on that? Randomized block designs, I think, are a lot easier to draw. Not every single design is going to be easy to draw. So we have 3 treatments, not 6. We want the treatment groups to be as even as possible. And we are isolating here the effect of the fertilizer. We're saying, okay, I know that there are these other places that might affect my outcome. So I'm going to block to control that so that I'm really only focusing on the variable at hand. Oh my God, I'm talking way too much here. So we have studies, retrospective and prospective. Do you have your attention here? This is why I do the video, because I think it makes this go a lot quicker. Because you're already half asleep, if not fully asleep, right? It's like I'm not. It's like I'm 70% asleep. I'm still here. Retrospective and prospective. What it's saying, did we select our individuals and then gather data as time goes on? Or Did I select my individuals and then look back at data I've already collected? I can do a retrospective study on you guys. And I can say, what characteristics are most common in an AP statistics student? And I can go back and saying, average number of AP classes taken, average score in Algebra 2. I can do all of these things. Or I can say, is there a relationship between your grades in AP statistics and your score on the AP test? And I can go through and calculate that, prospective. Or I can take last year's students and say, you know what, I'm going to do this study. I'm going to use last year's kids. Data was already there. I'm going to look at theirs, retrospective. Did the data exist before or after you started the study? That's retrospective versus prospective. So, hi. Sometimes in before and afters, how much did you weigh before the program? How much did you weigh after? What was your score on this SAT before you took the class? What was your score after? So there are similarities in each of those because you're the same person. It's going to have effect, right? Would you agree that who you are can play a role in how effective anything is? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do matching. So a matching in an observational study is the same thing as blocking in an experiment. It's like saying, I think these guys go together, so I'm going to match those pairs together. Versus blocking in an experiment, I think these things might affect the outcome, so I'm going to only study by those. So in each of those, basically what we're doing is we're grouping similar subjects together and then only comparing within each of those similarities to reduce your variation. So the whole thing here in every experiment and every study is to reduce your variability as much as possible. Variability is how much change you have between each of your elements so that you can attribute your change to the factor at hand. Tick, 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 tick. All right, here we go. I love this problem. Please read this problem. This is a true story. 100%. So from here on out, we're just doing practice problems. The looks on your faces right now are priceless. They were told you're going to be in a study, but maggot therapy is something that's been around for thousands of years. No. I'd do it for free because I know the outcome of this experiment. For those of you who don't know, maggots only eat dead tissue. They will not, you could cover me in maggots right now. I'd be horribly grossed out. They would do nothing to me. You can't borrow one, but you can have one. That would be really gross. Don't give it back. She wants to borrow a tissue, please. Blah. So we've got a couple of different things here. We have open wounds, and I believe these open wounds were on the lower limbs, or on any limb? Lower limbs. Lower limbs. So you get a really bad cut, or you're involved in a shooting, or you've had a horrible accident. And so you have all of this kind of torn up flesh. It's not really a pretty way to say that. So you had two options. No matter what, you would be put under. So you would not know which treatment you were initially being given. The doctor would either surgically remove the dead tissue, because if you leave dead tissue behind, that can cause infection. That can actually kill you. So you've got to remove the dead tissue so that the healthy stuff can heal. So they would either surgically remove infected areas, but unfortunately when you're doing surgery, you can't remove just the exact dead tissue. You're going to get some of the good tissue removed with it. Do you understand what I'm talking about? In order to cut out this little piece that kind of flips around and in and out, you're going to have to remove some good stuff with that, which is the danger behind surgery. If you have to remove something that's good, that's important, it can be a really bad thing. Whereas with the maggots, what they would do is, again, they'd clean out the wound. They put a little patch over the wound, and they would put some maggots in that. Then they would cover the patch. So from externally, you'd look at it, and both wounds would have these big patches over the top of them. And you're not going to be touching it because you don't want to be scratching something you just had a surgery on, because that's going to affect it anyway. And so what they did that. And then what they did is, as they maintained it, they would make it so that the person could not see, as a nurse or a doctor would clean the wound, change the patch, put in fresh maggots. I know, it sounds absolutely disgusting, but this is true. Now, after 8 days, they were cleaning it and monitoring it as they went through, but the patients never knew what was going on. They were never straight out told, dude, I put maggots all up in your leg. Or we cut that stuff out. They weren't told. They were asked to kind of describe what was going on. So what's interesting is that the percentage of dead tissue that was remaining in the wound from maggot treatment was 54% compared to 67%, like about 55 to 67% comparison here. So there was less dead tissue remaining with maggots than with the actual surgery. So it says neither the patients nor the doctors evaluating the wounds knew which therapy was applied. How do the doctors not know? Yes, obviously the doctor that treated them knew what it was going to be. But at the very end, when a final doctor looks at the revealed wound and measures how much dead tissue is left, they had nothing to do with the initial surgery, the maintenance of it, or anything like that. So all they knew is, here's a wound, some of the tissue is dead. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so here are my situations. What kind of a study was this? Was this an observational study? Was this an experiment? Why is this an experiment? Because what? You can do cause and effect, but why? There was assigned random treatments. Okay? You didn't go out there and say, whoo, I feel kind of maggoty today. You didn't do that. Some doctor assigned it to you. Okay? And it actually is what we call a double-blind experiment. And it's double-blind because the person physically involved in the experiment, the patient, and the person taking the final measurements did not know what was going on. Obviously, the surgeons or the nurses, they knew what was going on, but they didn't interact in a way where the patient would know what they're doing. And the final medical evaluator didn't know. So those are the two things for double blind. The person involved directly in the experiment and the person taking the final measurements. Those are the two sides of your coin, not doctors and patients. Okay? Do you think this was an appropriate choice to determine whether or not maggots or surgery was better? Double-blind experiment, randomized. Yeah, that's freaking glorious. Beautiful. You need to have the randomization. Double-blind, because just knowing you have maggots crawling on your leg might make you want to go, oh my God, that's disgusting. I don't know. I've never had maggot surgery. Okay? Who were the subjects here? The wounded men. And specifically, if you had it in front of you, you would say how many? The 100 men, specifically wounds on their lower limbs. You want to be as specific as possible here. My favorite word in this class is context. Okay? So what would be the treatments? The type of, surgery versus maggot treatment. One treatment, 2 levels. What is my response variable? Percentage of dead tissue remaining after 8 weeks. Again, be as clear as possible. So the percentage of dead tissue still in the wounds. Isn't that a lovely thing? I just think that's really cool. All right, try this one. Same questions. Talk amongst yourselves, discuss. And if you're an individual that has trouble reading these up on the board, just bring your textbook. Tell you what page and what number it is we're looking at. Thank you. Eden. What time is it? No, they gave you a lot of warning, didn't they? Okay, so do you guys get this read? Talk through the problems, because there's been a whole lot of nothing going on vocally wise, except for me. I want to see you talking. Just for when you leave.
I feel so bad, but I also physics is so terrible.
I understand.
So, why am I not in sweatpants?
How is it spelled? Is there no E after the T?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Shush, leave me alone. I can't spell. Hey, I spelled operation like wrong for years teaching algebra. Order of operations. Is that 1P or 2? Operation. Yeah, I did it with 2. Huh? DECISION? No. Eagle. Eagle. I always thought it was EL.
I can spell exercise. That's why, like, some words I really don't know how to spell still, but, like, I just avoid, necessary. I think that's what necessary for a very long time.
Okay, so let's go through and answer some of these questions. What kind of a study was this? Anything else going on in an experiment? Were there any special things I did with it? Alcohol. Blocking. This was a blocked experiment. When I ask you what kind of study it is, you must be specific. And technically, this should be a randomized blocked experiment. Okay, I blocked by something, and I randomly assigned between it.
So, didn't the compare between
Correct.
But when we be comparing the estrogen levels between the block?
We're looking to see, first off, whether or not... Okay, let me go back. So basically what we're looking at here is our two blocks that we're going to be looking at are women that were on the supplement and that women that weren't. Because we think maybe the supplement itself is going to have an effect on what happens after alcohol. Okay, so I'm going to look to see how much it changed with people with estrogen added and without. To see, and maybe we'll see that it doesn't make a difference in one group, but it does make a difference in the other. Maybe we'll see it makes a bigger difference in one group than in the other. But I'm not going to compare one person in this group to one person in this block. Okay? Yes, sir. Quickly, please. So who are my subjects? Be specific. Men? Women? All women? What kind of menopause? What kind of women? Old ladies. Bunch of cranky old biddies. No, we are talking about here everyone's like going, that was funny. Post-menopausal women. Because we think that after you have gone through menopause, so post-menopausal, you might have this problem.
If we didn't know that word,
Then you would say, you be as specific as you can. Okay? Geriatric ladies. Don't be ridiculous like me, just, be specific. What were my factors? Shh. What were how many factors did I have? 1, 2, 12. Alcohol. One factor. Alcohol. What were my levels? Alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage. So we've got, and it's really not just alcohol, but it's our beverage. The beverage is, guys, please. We don't need to, they're okay. Just old ladies, we'll go with that. So we're looking at our treatment being the beverage that they receive. Whether it is alcoholic or non, those are your levels. Okay? What is the response variable? Not just estrogen levels, but we're looking at the very end, was your change or your increase in estrogen levels. Because that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to just know their end point. I want to know how much it changed from beginning to end. Do you see how that specificity is important there? Okay, because if all I have is the end, some people naturally have higher levels of estrogen than others. And I can't quite tell what effect the alcohol or non-alcoholic beverage played in the role. Okay? All right. I love this one. They've done stuff like this so many times. It's kind of cool. I know. Pretty cool, huh? Cheater, pumpkin eaters. Pumpkin spice drinkers. Big brother is watching you. The number of kids who freak out just by putting a timer on the board, yeah, putting gigantic eyes in the front of the room is not going to affect anyone negatively. Kind of a cool idea, though, huh? And they do this all the time. There's always studies like this. They have, they're actually even like, now I think Sweden, there's countries now that have an honor system grocery store. Yeah. Pay what you can, take what you need. I don't remember exactly where they are, but they're doing this in many different locations. That's what they're called, honor systems. They have honor system fruit stands by the side of the road or drink stands by the side of the road because they hope for the best in people. And you would be surprised that a lot of people will pay more than what's being asked simply because they don't want to worry about change, or because they anticipate somebody else will need to take something but not have the money for it. So it really is quite impressive how those work. But here's my question. Is this a survey, observational study, or an experiment? Say observational study. What's the big difference between observational studies and experiments in the way that they're run? Manipulation. Has there been any manipulation here? Yes. What did I manipulate or change? The picture itself. The picture itself has been manipulated. I might not be standing there saying, you must pay for this now. I might not be shocking you every time you wrongly fail to leave money or whatever. The treatment is the actual picture on the wall. So, what are your variables going to be? What's my response variable? Sometimes it's easiest to identify response variable. How much the people paid. Maybe over the course of the day. What is the average payment per drink, if you want to work it that way. So what is the explanatory variable then? What do I think explains how much people paid? The picture on the wall. Whether it were eyes or just a pretty flower. Okay. What do you think increased significantly means? A lot. Okay. That can be good. But why do they say, because I could have just said it increased a lot. What point does putting the word statistically in there mean? Not just a noticeable change. And this is something I haven't specifically said to you before, so I'm trying to think where your brains are at. It's greater than 5%. And basically no, it's not greater than 5%. The likelihood of what you saw occurring, just given natural sampling variability, the fact that samples change from one to the other, is going to be less than a 5% chance. Okay? The likelihood of seeing what we saw just by chance is going to be less than 5%. Could it still be by chance? Yes, it's just not very likely. So increased significantly means that the difference is going to be due to something more than just how things change from one group to the next. Okay? Do we have time? We've got a little bit of time. Hypertension. Here's a good one. Cool thing with statistics, every problem is a word problem. Means you actually have to read them. Okay, what do you think? Survey, observational study, or experiment? Observational study. Why? Yes, the next question says retrospective or prospective. And those are only studies. But beyond our critical thinking skills by looking at the next question. Why is it an observational study? Yeah, I'm not going to stand there and manipulate your blood pressure level. Not going to threaten to I don't know, prod you with a cattle prod if you don't answer correctly. And then all of a sudden your blood pressure skyrockets. Ah! Can't concentrate. So this is an observational study because you did not manipulate the subject. Simple. So, Sush, retro or prospective? Prospective. Why? I don't care. Read it. That's good. That would stink. You just contradicted yourself there. So you have your subjects and you collect data as time goes on versus you had data in advance and then picked your subjects. That's retrospective. When the data pre-existed, that's retrospective. I have my subjects, I'm going to be recording data, that's prospective. So who are my subjects? Yeah, you don't even really have to do much. You can literally pull it from the problem. 200 older men and women with moderately high blood pressure. Or actually, no, just 200 older men and women, because the groups that I'm looking at, high blood pressure versus not. And then the parameter of interest, what am I measuring? Memory and reaction time. We're looking at the difference in these two situations. All right. So we're just going to go on. I don't like that problem anyways. Hee. In the past, this unit always fell around Halloween, so it was appropriate. Good question. I can tell you. Your test for this unit is going to be on next week, Tuesday. Okay?